All right, so today we have Ksenia Se. She is the founder and editor at Touring Post, which you can find at touringpost.com. So, welcome to the podcast, Senya.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben.
Your publication obviously covers a lot of the most bleeding edge things in AI, but I guess let's start with a heat check, which is around the state of adoption. So I talked to a lot of people about in the enterprise about what they're doing in AI. But I'm curious what you're hearing in terms of what people are actually doing. So, for example, the big topics this year, at least in the startup world, are agents and multimodal reasoning. I think a lot of those are happening in the enterprise in various degrees. But what's your sense in terms of the reality on the ground?
Yeah, I just recently came from the conference for software developers, and that was very interesting to see how AI is widely adopted by software developers and engineers. And it was not, it was not about vibe coding. It was people from Capital One. It was people from universities, from OpenAI, Anthropic, telling how they also implement AI in their daily work. So I think with that part, what we saw this year is that 2025 did not become the year of agents. This conversation about decade of agents, but I think 2025 became the year when we got used to AI and on many, many levels, including enterprise business people, but also people who building the infrastructure in the enterprises.
So this conference you attended to, as you mentioned, so there were obviously the people building the tools, but there were also people who were using tools, right? So
Mhm.
what? Give us a sense of the perspective of the people using the tools.
So it was mostly it was conference about coding, and there were people who are building these coding tools using different agentic workflows. But what was interesting is that there were, people from like OpenAI and Anthropic, and they were pushing the agenda for coders to start using their platforms more because it's all connected inside, and then it's better for you to just use this platform. So it's like interesting talk. And then there was a talk from Minimax, which is a Chinese company, and it was super interesting that they have a completely different view on it and different approach. They see together coders and researchers and like app developers. Everyone sits together, and that becomes like a combination of using and building, and that's very different. That's very different from how Western companies present it and how this Chinese company presented it. So I think that's like another thing that we see is just cross pollination and building together inside different companies, different platforms.
So I'm curious, what was? Did you get a chance to talk to people from non-tool providers, like you mentioned, Capital One, for example? So companies like those, which one associates with enterprise.
I haven't talked to this person specifically, but he was talking a lot about trust. And I think that's one of the biggest topics in enterprise, right? How do we trust the systems? And then the topic of verification becomes one of the main ones for enterprises specifically.
So you mentioned that this year, obviously, we all chatted and talked and wrote and built with agents, but it seems like the actual adoption in the enterprise is a bit slower than we expected. So, what's your sense of agents in the enterprise?
I was looking through the articles that I've written throughout this year because so many things happened. It's like really hard to even remember what happened. But in the middle of the year was the State of AI by Stanford University, and that
Oh
was
yeah.
actually there. That in this report, they was saying that actual enterprises are adopting AI on many levels, and I think it's work in progress. It's not agents, we take them and they work. It's building these workflows and building the infrastructure for these agents to be able to perform work along humans. And this the infrastructure level changes on many different levels. I just wanted to maybe go a little deeper in enterprise from your perspective, because I think
Sure.
you know more about it, and I'm very curious what you see from enterprise perspective.
Well, so I think that actually there's a lot of piloting happening, right? So it's that so a lot of people are definitely trying and building pilots, prototypes, but that large scale automation, I think, is a bit slower than we thought it would be, right? So as you mentioned coding, I think that's one area where I think there's a lot of actual usage because that's not necessarily customer facing. It's that I think the distinction that people make is, is this going to be internal or external? It's a big kind of fork in terms of how much are we going to push this, right? So, and I think that one thing that people underestimated going into this, as you mentioned, is that there's a certain level of foundation that you need to have in place. So a lot of that has to do with data, frankly, given that this current manifestation of AI really relies on you being able to provide it more context, right? So it really is going to come down to your data foundation and all those integration points. Now, when it comes to agents, obviously there's also the extra integration around tools. And so then that's also requires some amount of preparation and foundation in the enterprise, right? So what's interesting is that there's actually three options for enterprises generally, right? So the first is they take their existing machine learning platform, that they were using for forecasting, those kinds of things, right? Structured data, and try to extend that to generative AI. It's a bit challenging, as you imagine, right? Because the models are different, the workloads, the data pipelines are a little more challenging for generative AI. The second option is to do the endpoint, right? So you rely mainly on external services. I'm just going to use API endpoints. Hopefully, these endpoints allow me to do some amount of model customization, like fine tuning, maybe some RAG. But the challenge there, of course, is you kind of lose the skill set. I guess you don't develop the skills to push this technology further because you're completely reliant on someone else, right? So your internal tech team doesn't really get better. And then finally, the most bleeding edge companies, mostly in tech, a lot of them here in Silicon Valley, actually, almost all these Silicon Valley startups are building custom AI platforms, right? On the compute side, it's comprised of three open source projects, right? So PyTorch, Ray, and Kubernetes. So, and then some AI models at their disposal, like whatever Kimi, DeepSeek, Gemma. So, open weights models. So, you've got PyTorch, AI, Ray, and Kubernetes, the so-called Park stack. But anyway, so I kind of hijacked your interview. So, let me ask you a question, which is basically so last year, as I mentioned, right? So people were abuzz about, I guess, in the early part of the year, reasoning because of the release of DeepSeek and then multimodality and agents. So next year, what's your sense of what the buzzwords will be? Given that the current buzzwords, Senya, have not been actually kind of fully deployed yet. So what will people be kind of excited about
Yeah,
next year?
we will keep talking about agentic
Yeah.
workflows, I believe, for sure, for years to come. I would drop a word robotics, but before that, I would like to return to what you said about enterprises also, because I think here's an important distinction about like infrastructure and the companies that you mentioned that they are building custom platforms and actual usage, right? Because I think the year, and as you mentioned, there was the year when there was a lot of pilots and it was a lot of intention to use AI in enterprises, right? So it was someone very excited about AI and trying to build to bring it into enterprise. An interesting thing happened recently with Microsoft, who deployed everything they built to every one of their client. So if you imagine how many enterprises are their clients, that becomes a different level of adoption from the people who didn't even signed up for being interested in AI. But now, through Microsoft in their business environments, they will be adopting it very quickly. I think that's very important for this for the next year.
And Google is doing something similar, right? So,
Yeah, it's just that Microsoft is much more enterprise related in that sense. This adoption will be much bigger next year, I think, in enterprise as well.
so you were saying robotics, which by the way, Senya, uh, the new marketing term is, what is it? Embodied AI, right?
Embodied AI, physical AI. Yeah, 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 yeah. But robotics is still struggling with with the thing that you mentioned, data. There is not enough data. And I think the next year, with all this interest in spatial intelligence and world models, in creating this new data, that's exciting year to observe. I don't think we will be able to have like domestic robots and picking up our laundry and doing laundry, but we will like getting there slowly there. 5 6 years. I don't think it will like next year of robotics, but
Yeah, yeah. It seems like so in robotics, right? So as you mentioned, data. So they have their own kind of tricks for generating data, right? So
mm-hmm,
learning in the virtual world, learning by watching humans, and then some sort of hybrid. And then also there's these robotics researchers who are kind of promoting this notion of the robotics foundation model, right? So
mm-hmm,
where you rather than having a robot just learn everything from scratch, you build a foundation model which you can just then fine tune. Hey, instead of folding a towel, you will now fold a t-shirt, right? So uh, but then there's obvious skeptics, right? So I don't know if you follow the work of Rodney Brooks. He's like one of these grandfathers of robotics, but he's a bit skeptical about the whole robotics foundation models. Particularly, he says that one of the main problems of this type of physical robotics is grasping, right? So it's basically going to be the kind of the sense of touch in the fingers, which is something we as humans take for granted, which he doesn't believe that deep learning can get to. Anyway, so again, I derailed your thing there. So robotics,
I think a few interesting things happening here in terms of creating data from not synthetic data, but actual data from the real world, because open source robotics becomes much more popular. And I think what we will see is the interest is so high, especially from like children perspective. And it's
yeah,
not that expensive now to, 3D print a robot arm and get an NVIDIA I don't know, a Jetson Thor computer, and then connect it together and start building this robotics project. Open source, everything is out there now with Lerobot from Hugging Face. So that's very exciting. I think that will like expand this data from so many projects.
by the way, so Rodney Brooks makes a couple of interesting points as well. One is, I think, when we say the word robotics or embodied AI, we focus too much on this humanoid metaphor, which actually, you know, is far from reality. I mean, but the point he makes is actually there's a lot of robotics already in warehouses
Yeah.
that are not humanoids, right? So they're just carts moving around. And then the second point he makes is that robots will have to exist with humans. So like in a warehouse, those robots that move things around in a warehouse, they are navigating the same space as humans do. So there's going to be a lot of implications of that, right? So in terms of safety and just the way the robot has to coexist with humans.
Yeah.
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 So so embodied AI. So anything else that you think will explode in the popular mindset next year?
Yeah. I don't know about explode.
Let me throw a term that actually I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is this world model.
Uh-huh.
But the reason I say I've been thinking about it lately is because I've literally kind of started reading about this notion of world model, and then it turns out it actually I came up with like seven different definitions of world model. But anyway, so I think the world model, if you look at Google Trends, it is a trendy term, right? So
Yeah.
so what do you think is behind the interest in this term of world models?
Well, I think it's all connected to robotics as well. It's this spatial intelligence that's also on the rise now, thanks to Fei Li, who is so very precise and stubborn into, pushing these new terms and creating the whole new fields around her. I was just reading her book, The World I See, and it's fascinating how throughout her career for the last 25, 30 years, she's been so precise about this computer vision, and now she's so articulate about the spatial intelligence and the world models that they build in the world labs. It's all for better understanding how the computers, how the robotics, how the self-driving can be reliable. So I don't know if world models will captivate a lot of like majority of population, but it's for sure will be one of the biggest research areas. As well as now I'll throw a term, AI for science.
Okay. Yeah. Kevin Weil at the OpenAI, he just moved over to doing uh,
Hmm.
AI for science. Yeah. No, I mean, it's super exciting, right? So, what specific applications in science you think?
Well, there is a bunch, right? Google DeepMind is, of course, ahead of everyone. And what they're building to create new algorithms that can solve many different scientific programs it is just mind blowing. But what it started is this all new startups appear. AI for chemistry, AI for math, and AI scientists from Sakana AI. So this is one of the biggest movement I think that we will see developing more in the next year because biggest minds from big labs are moving into startup area just because they're so passionate about creating this algorithms that can solve scientific problems for us.
So the AI format, I think, is natural because basically that's how they test their models, right? So, and then AI for drug discovery, I think, because of the success of AlphaFold
Hmm.
and things like that. So, are there any specific other verticals that you're paying attention to besides those two? Is there like a big movement around AI for physics?
For physics, AI for physics.
I think there are some people, but it's not like to the extent that math, right?
Yeah, it's more. It's I would say it's more around quantum computing. All the research that's happening around
Okay.
physics and going into this quantum physics world. And also, not for the next year, but quantum computers are already here. We still do not fully know how to use them and for what. But NVIDIA is working hard to connect, this building this NVQ link to connect GPUs to QPUs. So this is also very exciting area that just started actively developing this year, and I think next year we will see some interesting breakthroughs.
So I have a phrase for you, which is, I think likely next year, but don't
Don't hold your
listeners,
tongue.
don't hold my feet to the fire. AI bubble bursts.
Well, let's discuss
So,
what is AI bubble.
so definitely there seems to be an over investment ahead
Mm-hmm.
of usage and revenue, right? So definitely, if you look at the pre-announced commitments, I don't know how hard or soft those commitments are to data center build outs. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking trillions of dollars. But as we mentioned, usage is lagging. You look at the biggest private companies in this space, OpenAI and Anthropic, the multiples are off the charts, right? So they have a lot of revenue, but their burn rates far exceed their revenue. And then obviously they have this announced commitments to build even more data centers. And then obviously there's that weird circular financing dance that's happening in AI, right? So where NVIDIA invests in OpenAI and OpenAI invests in CoreWeave, and then OpenAI buys NVIDIA chips. I mean, it's just
It's a
so
loop.
people are paying attention, but at the root of it is leverage and just kind of the multiples are just don't make sense for a lot of people. So that's what the bubble is, right? So then is next year going to be the year of reckoning? Is next year the day the music stops, as they say?
I don't think so. I think so. There are a couple of bubbles that are discussed, that people discuss in the industry. Um, Most positive discussing the LLM bubble, right? That everyone putting so much money into LLMs, but that's actually not the main area, or it's not the only one. It's not how we get to super intelligence. There is also world models and spatial intelligence. There is also all other sorts of intelligence, like causal, that we don't even pay attention to much, though I think it's super important. So I think the attention will switch to other areas of research. It's really needed. In terms of companies, well, OpenAI definitely needs to come up with some great business strategy, because otherwise they will just burn through GPUs, and that's it's not enough revenue. In terms of the loop, and you said the usage is lagging, the usage from users is lagging because it's just not that many people are using AI. But
Oh, just the revenue is lagging.
yeah,
Uh,
but
you
if
know,
we think about the what is happening in research, what's happening in science, again, in self-driving, this is a huge consumption of all this compute. So it's actually working. It's actually like
which by the way, self driving is also losing money.
yeah, but at least something is happening now. We can try Tesla to drive around, which is exciting. It was not the case 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But so I think it's more of a bubble around some companies, but it's not a bubble about AI per
Well,
se.
yeah.
And
I mean,
some
so
people, compare it to the dot bubble, dot com bubble. But I don't think it's the same comparison, because back then, internet was such a novelty. Nobody knew what it was. There was so much infrastructure to build. Everything was just new. And with AI, as you well know, and machine learning, it's like the last 60 years of actual usage. Like, AI is with our iPhones with the very beginning. So I don't think it's an AI bubble. I think it's maybe some business strategist bubble, but and I'm not
but
I'm not
isn't that just splitting hairs? By the way, I lived through the dot com bubble as well, in the sense that the point is the financial fundamentals are challenging and will remain challenging, right? So, and a lot of there's a bit of the assumption is that there's always going to be someone else to fund your next round
Mhm.
at a higher valuation, right? So I- i- So imagine raising money on a down round. What would be the implication for your workforce, right? So the morale. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Clearly, there's other approaches to AI, but the point is that none of them seem to be what people are investing in at the moment, right? So and there's a bit of a herd mentality, if I would say, right? So if you go back to why did deep learning blow up? Well, because they did well in ImageNet, right? So
Yeah.
before then, they didn't. No one was paying attention, right? So for one of these techniques to really draw attention, they really need to do something like that,
Mhm.
and it's far from clear if it's like imagine in machine learning, it's like AI and machine learning is like search in some ways, right? So you're looking for a model that will you're in a search space and you're looking for different models. But right now, everyone seems to be looking in the same area.
Yes, yes.
So then, in order for to convince all these people to move to a different area, you have to show them some signs of hope, right?
Yeah.
But then that doesn't, uh, even after that, you still have all this build out and the debt that people are. By the way, one thing that's changed now is the role of debt, right?
Hmm.
So it used to be debt was a East Coast thing, but now West Coast companies are starting to play around with financing some of these data centers with debt. So we'll see. So hopefully I'm wrong.
You
Uh,
think it will burst? And if it will, how
no,
will
no, I
happen?
think there will be some sort of reckoning next year. I would imagine because basically at some point you're gonna, you have to keep raising money. And then you're gonna run out of places to raise money from, right? So Middle East also has finite amount of money, right? So, uh, and unless they can show real the revenues so lagging right now. Anyway, so in closing, what other things are on your radar for 26?
I think on my radar is how AI is going to change education. I think that's super important. I think that's lagging significantly, both in schools and universities, because the opportunities that AI provides, and we can talk about bad sides, we can talk about good stuff, but having kids who are growing into this new era and talking with AI with them and seeing how it can accelerate the acquiring of knowledge. I'm very inspired by that, and I think this is the topic that not that many people talk about, but it should completely change the whole educational system.
Yeah, yeah, I'm curious actually because I was a professor in a previous life, and I can't imagine now teaching the same way I would, right? So back then, right? Because back then you're like this person in front of the room who has all of the knowledge and authority, right? So which is completely not the case anymore.
Yeah.
So in light of that, what's your role and how do you manage a classroom? Because you can't. It's the kind of thing that you can try to take away from students, but no, they're going to use it anyway. So in light of that, what is your role and what should be the tools and guardrails, right? So
I think one of the most important rules is to teach to ask the question and fact check, because I think we forgot it with social networks. That was one of the biggest disadvantages of social networks. You just believe everything you see. And I think with generative AI, it's so easy to be fooled. So the role of the teacher becomes to tell you how to talk with these models and how to ask questions. I'm a big believer in asking the right question. So I think this what trains the critical thinking the most. And I think that's the role of a teacher, helping finding the going deeper and deeper and deeper and asking the best questions.
by the way, I want to close with this question, which is on the open weights models, right? So obviously, right now the top open weights models are from China, right?
Mhm.
So Kimi, Moonshot, Alibaba
Unirats.
Clan, yeah. So are there any Western open weights models that I guess Gemma,
Almost free.
I'm not sure Mistral really counts, but Gemma might be. I did talk to someone at Google's Gemma team, and they said they could release even better models if they wanted to. The key is if they want to, right? So, and then there's obviously the first mover here was Llama, which I don't know if they're gonna continue, right? So,
Yeah.
Senya, what's gonna be our source of Western open weights models?
Well, Institute of Allen AI, they are pushing open source very heavily, and they in November they released Almo 3, which is fully open, not only weights, it's all transparent. And this is just an amazing way to demonstrate for the closed labs how to do that. And one of the researchers in AI2, Nathan Lambert, he organized sort of a movement for open source, for the Western open source, Hugging Face doing this amazing job. And through their work, the companies like NVIDIA releases a lot of open source models. Some of them open weight, some of them more. But even OpenAI, I think, started open up a little bit. Meta is moving kind of in a different direction, though.
Yeah, it's kind of a TBD. We don't know, right? So
Yeah,
hopefully they do something. Like I said, the Gemma team could release even better models, but I don't, someone has to convince them to do that. But I guess I'm waiting for the time when I go to LM Arena leaderboard and I start seeing more Western open weights models again.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Well,
I
they
don't
have
know.
these restrictions of getting more revenue that they cannot solve.
Y- Yeah, 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 yeah. So, and with that, thank you, Senya.
Thank you so much, Ben.